My first question is about the latest news. I see that Hungary's been in the news after this EU Parliament vote. What is the government's position on this vote, and how is the government going to respond?
If we wanted to put it shortly, that's a shame on the European Parliament, especially that eventually they've managed to find a way to take political revenge on the country. They didn't even deny that it's not the government, but Hungary itself who was the target. And they basically made a fraud by not keeping their own rules if it's about democratic voting. You know, in a democratic system where you have 3 buttons on your desk suggesting yes, no, and abstain, and someone pushes the abstain button, according to the treaty, that is the Lisbon Treaty, all cast votes should be counted. That's not what happened, so we all know that legally it's very questionable what happened. As a matter of fact, they wanted to camouflage the whole political revenge into a legal process. So we stand for it. I mean, we've been through many such political attacks and through a witch hunt actually against Hungary for the past 8 years because they don't like us. And we all know that the real reasons behind what happened in the European Parliament, apart from the political revenge, is our position on illegal migration.
Very good. And, you know, before coming, I looked at some polls. One was taken by the Chatham House, and they surveyed, I think, 10 European Union countries. And in every single one, at least a strong majority supported a total end to the mass migration, to the Islamic migration. And yet they're talking about democratic values and so on. What does the EU actually mean when they talk about democracy and democratic values, if not representing the will of the people?
Indeed, this is the biggest question. As a matter of fact, what we see developing is not simply a quarrel over illegal migration. It's a quarrel over the future of Europe. As a matter of fact, it's a quarrel over the very values they are vindicating, that they have, you know, the moral high ground from which they can tell you what European values are. We strongly believe that the European values are based on law and legality. European law, including the treaty and the existing legal environment, is the common value system. Politics and political opinion does not belong to the value system, especially if it's coming from the political far left, the liberals and the socialists in Europe. It is as if, you know, one side, one political side wanted to monopolize that there's only one interpretation of the world around you. And it would be difficult, I believe, in the United States, but it's especially difficult here in Europe, where the political spectrum has always been more colorful. The very nature of Europe has always been diversity, not only in respect of national communities and states, but also in political view. And we simply reject the perception that the only approach to institutions, the working of democracy, the perception of democracy and the interpretation of democracy is so-called liberal, especially that it has never been defined what they mean by liberal, and especially that we are Christian Democrats, and we all know that by establishing the European Union back in the 50s and 60s, Christian democracy did more about and for European democracy than any other political idea or political group.
Okay. I'll jump ahead real quick then, since you touched on that. I hear the Prime Minister talk often about Christianity and the Christian foundations of European civilization and returning to those Christian values. What does that mean exactly? And when the Prime Minister talks like that, is he talking about rekindling faith in the Christian religion, or just the kind of culture and presuppositions associated with it?
I truly believe that in his words and his perception, both go together. But we don't vindicate and we don't want to enforce religion and belief on anyone. We would like to tell and kind of reawaken Europeans that they like it or not. Obviously they do like the freedoms, the institutions, the way of life we have developed here in Europe. It is based on Christianity. If not religion, then the philosophical and political reasoning that was coming from Christianity. Christianity in many things is obviously is misleading, but because what we mean by Christianity is the Judeo-Christian, or rather the Greek or Roman Judeo-Christian inheritance and legacy we have. In short, we call it Christianity. In short, we refer to it as the foundations for Europe. Full stop. I mean, European institutions, nation states, the working of the territorial states here in Europe for the past couple of centuries, even thousands of years, and the rules of society how our families and societies and nations are organizing themselves are all based on values and methods that are coming from Christianity. If someone wants to substitute it with something different, you know, in the name of tolerance and neutrality, it means that it's going to be something different. So, as recently many discussions we say, and don't make the mistake that it is alien to anyone, the very nature of what we believe Europe is, that it is not neutral. It is based on Christianity, therefore it should have or should remain within the confines of those ideas and approaches which determined us. This is what we indicate as Christian Democrats, that our perspective is very much not simply influenced, but is determined and is based on what Christianity has told us as a religion and as a culture. And we are not ready to give it up in face of something we don't know what it is. I mean, you know, many who claim for European values are basically claiming that those values are non-values since they are neutral. The very nature of values is that they have a character, so they cannot be neutral.
Okay, very good. So about the agenda, I've heard the Prime Minister talk a lot about the agenda with the mass migration, why the EU and the United Nations are promoting it. What do you think? What is the real purpose? You know, they say it's for humanitarian reasons, then they say it's for economic reasons. What is the real reason why they are pushing so hard to have this mass migration?
We don't believe in conspiracy theories because we see how the conspiracy is evolving. At the end of the day, if you take a look at the measures, the proposals that are coming from European institutions and most of the political left and liberals in the European Union, and in many respects actually some corners of the European People's Party, and that is the party group we belong in the European Union, is a pro-migration attitude. That perception we see believes in something we reject, and they believe in migration as a resource, as something that is going to rejuvenate Europe, as some put back in 2015, refreshing the blood of Europe, and they've indicated that they have a moral high ground from which they spread these ideas. We see that many of the Western European countries are coping or have to cope with the problems of the labor force, and that is that they require tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of people each year for the labor market. As they have basically depleted the Central European countries and Europe, here we go, there's a natural tendency to find workforce coming from outside. What they don't care about, and that's what we see, is the cultural and, if you like, religious character of the continent and the civilization we've been building. And indeed, we don't agree with this because, first of all, we've seen what happened back in 2015 when over 400,000 people passed the Hungarian borders without consent, without keeping any of the rules. So we see that illegal migration, and that's what is happening at the borders of Europe for the past years, basically only. Illegal migration is carrying dangers for public safety, of terrorism, and last but not least, a cultural problem, and that is, in Western Europe, most of those who arrived from Islamic countries are not integrating. We named that problem because we believe it's important, not because we don't like Muslims or we believe that, say, Islam is inferior to Christianity. It is simply the fact that the rules of those societies, those people who are coming from those societies, and obviously the values they carry with themselves, are not integrating. What we see in Western Europe, especially the numbers reach 5, 7, maybe 10%, nationally, localities even going up higher. The rules of the game are changing, and that is the rules of the value system we have developed and we are living in are changing. As a result, as a consequence, parallel societies are developing, and if Angela Merkel is alerting us that there are places and towns, cities, local communities, maybe even regions of Germany that the German rules, German public administration and the German political system is not working, but something else is working instead, that is something we would like to avoid here in Central Europe.
And I've heard the Prime Minister talk about abolishing national identities and how this mass migration is having the effect of undermining national identity through multiculturalism and through the importation of foreign cultures and foreign values. Is that part of a deliberate agenda, or is that maybe just a side effect of the need for labor? What do you think?
Maybe some elements are based on the need for labor and the workforce coming from non-European countries, but definitely there's a political agenda which is trying to change the very nature, the very face of Europe. And that is, there is an agenda, there's a political project called the United States of Europe, which would like to homogenize Europe and get rid of the very foundations of Europe, which is partly Christianity as religion and culture, and the nation state or nations as local communities. Homogenizing Europe is a dangerous project because it goes against the very nature of Europe. We know a lot about cultural diversity and multiculturalism because Europe has always been multicultural, full stop, for thousands of years. That's the very nature of Europe. But that multiculturalism is based on Christianity and a common value system that is coming from that religion and that cultural perception. It doesn't mean that Europe can mingle or integrate with a different cultural entity, which is Islam. Europe back in the Middle Ages and earlier has been fighting Islam for centuries, for an obvious reason. We don't want to fight anyone today, but we are not stupid, and we wouldn't like to forget the teaching of history, and that is, you cannot mingle things that are not that cannot be, put into each other, because there's not going to be a good outcome of it. You have to recognize that cultures are different at times. Any attempt to amalgamate them and and develop something of them is going to fail. That's the lesson of history.
The British now have voted to leave the European Union, and I wonder, what benefits does Hungary get from the European Union that make Hungary want to stay part of this when the European Union is trying to, tell you guys what to do and accept these policies that apparently the people don't want? So what benefits are you getting that justify staying in the European Union?
But the benefit is that we would like to belong to where we have always belonged to, and that is the European Community of States. Just because there is a project called the European Union, which is trying to take a shape, carrying on with a tradition which is going back for centuries. I mean, there were lots of attempts and various approaches to create a common European cultural system going back for centuries. So it doesn't mean that there is only one rule, or there should be only one rule. We've seen that actually happening under communism. So especially the Central European countries have another historical experience and legacy, and that is living in an empire which is trying to octroy things on you instead of asking your opinion and listening to you is not going to last long. This is the direction the European Union is taken. The political center in Brussels, in many respects, is not simply and technically stealing away sovereignty elements of the member states, which have never been given up by the treaty, but is increasingly vindicating that they know it better, what is good for the member states. I would reject that. I mean, we believe that Europe should remain, the European Union rather, should remain as it was designed at the very beginning, the effective and efficient cooperation of member states. In many respects, the strength of Europe is coming rather from the member states than from anywhere else, and maximizing efficiency and effectiveness, maximizing the performance, the activity of the European Union can only be achieved by strong member states.
And so what is Hungary doing to prevent this ongoing stealing of sovereignty by Brussels and this ongoing effort to impose policies from the center on all the member states?
Well, we raise our voice, as you see. We resist. We, if required, are going to wait till. I mean, that happened for the past couple of years, if it was about illegal migration. As we see the latest attempts, actually, which are trying to take away your capability, or rather your sovereignty to defend your own borders, or run your own asylum system, which has never been suggested that any member state is going to give up. There's a possibility that we have to use the most extreme political method and means. You know, you've asked about Brexit. Hungary was the only country which expressed the political view, which is the correct view, and that is that we respect the will of the British people. It's their decision. But we also told them in a public advertisement that we wanted them to stay, because the British have always represented the common sense in Europe. And the most we need here in Europe today is common sense, actually, if it's about approaching challenges, issues, and big questions, if it's about the future of Europe. Instead of a monolithic and monopolistic perception and the moral high ground the so-called liberals are trying to take, it is the common sense of Christian democracy and conservatives that is required today.
Okay. And I know Soros has been a lot in the news, especially as it relates to Hungary, and I know he's been active in trying to interfere maybe with Hungarian and European politics. And I saw that there was a piece of legislation, I don't know if it was a nickname, called the Stop Soros Act. So what is the situation with Soros? What kind of effects is his meddling having? What are maybe some examples of that, and what is the government doing about it?
Mr. Soros became a political problem because he wanted to become and wants to become a politician. He himself declared, as if it's about Hungary, that he wanted to become the political opposition of this government that is running the country for the third consecutive time, elected by two-thirds majority. Now we face a problem here. Nobody ever elected Mr. Soros. Nobody ever elected those NGOs he is very abundantly financing, who work in an international framework, who are very loud, in many respects very clever, and they obviously have not only influence but power. And we believe that democracy should be remaining and returning to its roots and to the fundamental rules, and that is mandate and power is coming from the people. It's the vote of the people that should decide who is exercising power and who is making political decisions. And if NGOs and billionaires like George Soros are going around this, vindicating that they, as an elite force, have a vision and they have the right to tell you what you should be doing without the democratic mandate, we are not assisting to it. So the Stop Soros package, as it is indeed being called, is a set of rules which we've been tightening for the past couple of years for the sake of democracy, and that is closing the loopholes by which NGOs come to political decision-making, come to decisively influencing and shaping policy-making and politics in a field where they have no mandate. We have, to tell you one example, we have a very special system here in Hungary. You can offer 1% of your personal income tax to civil organizations or to churches. That's a great system because it tells a lot about actually the support, the popular support of civil society. So if you wanted to measure democracy by that, you would find that NGOs like Helsinki Committee, Amnesty International and others who work from the lavish financing of Mr. Soros and others have a support of maybe a couple of hundreds of people. So they wouldn't be even able to exist without help coming from abroad. And indeed, that's the biggest danger to democracy. A democratically elected government has not only the right, but the duty, actually, to do everything to keep democracy as it should say, and that is based on the popular support of the popular vote. I think this is the name of the game here. There is an elitist version of democracy being supported by Mr. Soros, which is carrying no democratic mandate and legacy. And in the face of that, you have a government which is carrying not simply the majority vote, but the overall support of basically of the Hungarian people.
Okay. And I saw that in CNN, one of the EU Parliament's people, Guy Versh, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he called on the United States and the U.S. government to intervene in Hungary, saying that it's becoming anti-democratic. What is the relationship between the Hungarian government and the U.S. government, the Trump administration? Is it good relations? And what is this guy from the European Parliament talking about?
Well, if it was Mr. Verhofstadt, UN peacekeepers or the Marines should be already in Hungary for the past couple of years. Very fortunately, he's a lunatic and a utopist, And that's right. I mean, it does everything what he suggested, actually, about his political stance and the vision he has in the European Parliament. Now, coming back to American-Hungarian and Hungarian-American relations, we truly believe that the coming of Mr. Trump has opened up a new chapter in that relationship, especially helping to get rid of the burden the Democrats put on bilateral relations. And that burden was an ideological burden, as a matter of fact, much related to Mr. Soros and his circles, and much related to the so-called liberal agenda, which was trying to take a moral high ground, trying to vindicate that they have a right to interfere in domestic politics and tell you what the government, what Hungarian institutions should do. We believe that that chapter is closed. The new ambassador, very obviously, is following a different pattern, very rightly. We have a very active cooperation with him. He is very active in Hungary, acquainting himself with civil society, investors, entrepreneurs, in general with the country. And we truly appreciate that the effort to interfere is missing. We are in a very constructive dialogue. I think the meeting with the Prime Minister was going very well in that respect. And that is a signal we are trying to send to the Trump administration that do look at us as a friend. We have always been the friends of the United States, and do concentrate on those fields where we have demonstrated that we are working together. Security policies, military cooperation, investment. If we ask around and find those Americans who have invested in Hungary, they are going to tell you that Hungary is a great country to come.
Wonderful. Anything else that Americans and American conservatives ought to know about Hungary?
Keep an eye on us, because what we do here in Central Europe, it's not only Hungary in many respects, but the Visegrad Four, is rather about the real Europe, the Europe you knew, the Europe you probably would like to continue to exist.